Hello. The purpose of this video is to identify some of the human skull bones and features. So first let me show you this list right here. This is the list of my skull bones, and hopefully I can remember most of them. And first let's look at the human skull from the superior view. When you look at the human skull superiorly, you can see some of the main bones. You can see the frontal bone right here. You can see the two parietal bones, and you can see a part of the occipital bone. So this suture right here is called the coronal suture, and it connects the frontal bone with the two parietal bones. You can also see the sagittal suture right here, which connects two of the parietal bones together. And if you look at the skull posteriorly, you can see the lambdoid suture, which connects the two parietal bones with the occipital bone. So now let's look at the skull in the lateral view. When you look at the skull laterally, you can see the temporal bone right over here. You can also see the squamous suture, which connects the temporal bone to the parietal bone. You can also see the sphenoid bone right over here. You can see the zygomatic bone, the zygomatic arc, and the mandible. Now this is the ramus of the mandible, and this is the body of the mandible. You can also see this little hole right here is called the mandibular fossa. If I pull the mandible down, you can see the mandibular condyle and the carotid process of the mandible. You can also see the mandibular notch right over here. This little opening right here is called the external auditory meatus, and it's our ear. And this over here is the mastoid process, and this little sharp point is called the styloid process. So also in the lateral view we could see a part of the nasal bone and a part of the maxilla bone. So now let's look at the skull from the anterior view. And when you look at the skull anteriorly, you can see the eye sockets, you can see the supraorbital foramen right where the eyebrow is, and you can see the infraorbital foramen. You could also see the lacrimal bone right over here, and the nasolacrimal canal would be right at the edge of the eye where our tears come from. So if this is the lacrimal bone, the next bone inferiorly would be the ethmoid bone. Now also inside the eye sockets we could see a part of the sphenoid bone, and the top portion of the sphenoid bone would be called the lesser wing of the sphenoid bone, and the bottom portion would be called the greater wing of the sphenoid bone. Also we could see the superior orbital fissure to the top of the eye socket and the inferior orbital fissure to the bottom of the eye socket. Now if we look at this right here is the nasal bone, and if we look at the nose, we could see the anterior nasal spine right here. We could see the perpendicular plate of the ethmoid bone right over here, and inside the nose we could see the medial nasal concha and the inferior nasal concha, which is below the medial one. Also we could see this part right here is called the glabella. We could also see the vomer bone right to the bottom of this spine right here, of this perpendicular plate. We could also see the maxilla from the anterior view and the mandible. So now let's look at the skull from the superior view. When we look at the skull superiorly, we can see the crista galli located right over here, and we could see the cribriform plate. We could also really well see now the sphenoid bone right over here, and this medial part of the sphenoid bone is called the sella turcica. This large opening right here is called the foramen magnum, and this bumpy portion is called the petrous portion. And inside the petrous portion we could see the internal auditory meatus, which is like the internal ear. Now also, if we looked at the sphenoid bone from this view, we could see several foramina, and the very top foramina is called the foramen rotundum. The large oval one is called the foramen ovale, and the one below it is called the foramen spinosum. Also, right below the petrous portion, we could find the jugular foramen. And right over here we could find the carotid canal, and posterior to the carotid canal would be located the foramen lacerum, which in this particular model you can't see that too well, unfortunately. So, but this is the anterior view of the human skull, and I believe this is it. So thank you.